In this video, I'm going to go over BlackBerry stock, specifically the 2024 TD Security Technology Conference that was held on November 26, 2024. I'm not going to lie, a lot of it was repeat, but at the same time, there was one thing that Tim mentioned, and in my opinion, it just confirmed Cylance being sold, guaranteed. Like from the points I'm going to mention, it's going to be sold no matter what. But before I get to those points and my opinion and not share that, quick thing to note is I do own shares in the company, so please do your own due diligence and research before buying and selling, because I'm not a professional either, just my opinion. And a couple of important dates is for Q3 is most likely going to be on December 19th, 2024. This is just an estimated date. As we get closer, BlackBerry will release a press release stating the official date. And then also Q4 is important because that is the end of the fiscal year 2025, which is the date that they're expected and stated that they'll be cash flow positive. Again, that's March 26, 2025 for Q4. And in my opinion, this is just my opinion, I think there's a decent chance that they might be cash flow positive or at least break even for Q3. If they don't, it's not a big deal. It should not impact the stock unless it's insane amount of losses that they report in terms of Q3. But if it's not insane, then it should not affect the stock because they've been stating that by Q4, end of fiscal year 2025, they'll be cash flow positive, not Q3. But either way, get to the key points. And also one thing too, if you want to rewatch the TD and RBC, which was the conference before the TD one, the both replays should pop up right about now, right after each other. And also I do have a video on what you can expect for Q3. This is more just based off the numbers, forecast, analyst expectations, year-over-year comparison, quarter-over-quarter comparison, just strictly looking at the numbers for the most part. And I believe, if I remember correctly, a little bit of my opinion, but that's the video should pop up right about here as well for Q3 earnings again. There's that. Now, in terms of key points, the first two key points was just basically reiterating what they've stated in the past. So they quickly mentioned that cost cutting and that they said to be cash flow positive by Q4. So they mentioned the cost cutting and cash flow positive by Q4, again, March 26, 2025. Then they talked about the amount of costs that they have taken out, which they have mentioned in the past as well. Then they talked about the two divisions again, cybersecurity and IoT, again, the two divisions, and said it's been done to give focus on each division and management can make decisions on their division. So each management on each division makes their own decisions. And then they were asked, how do you think you could unlock shareholders' value, right? Everybody wants the share price to increase. And currently, in terms of share price, it's sitting at $2.57 US. It did, after hours, pop up to $2.64, I believe, maybe $2.61 back and forth. And then market cap's at $1.52 billion, which in my opinion, this is my opinion, again, I do own shares in the company. I think this is undervalued. I know everybody wants to see numbers, which Tim does touch base on that as well in terms of share price, but this is two divisions, IoT and cybersecurity, when other companies are cybersecurity and they have way more of a market cap. But again, it's the people want to see numbers, right? That's all it is at the end of the day. And so there's that. For in terms of, okay, so basically what Tim stated in terms of answering that question, how do you think you could unlock shareholders' value? Tim said it looks like the share price, it seems like it's a show me situation. So show me the revenue numbers and all stuff and profits. And he said the numbers are starting to come in. And in my opinion, I think that is the case. The new management has been pretty much running for give or take about a year, and everything they've stated in terms of targets, they have been hitting them. So if you've been holding the stock for some time, which I have too as well, it could still seem like it's at a slow pace, but if you look at it at what it is in terms of 1 year, give or take, like running the company, I think they're doing a pretty good job in my opinion, right? Again, that's just my opinion. Then he talked about how cyber is actually doing well if you take Cylance out of the equation. So he sees the value in cybersecurity division. So to me, I don't think that they're going to get rid of the cybersecurity division. It just doesn't make sense because in terms of synergy, the IoT and cybersecurity go hand in hand a little bit. They could get rid of the cybersecurity. I shouldn't say that it doesn't make sense. They could, but I think because they are seeing profits, if you take Cylance out, I think they're going to keep it. I don't see a reason to get rid of the cybersecurity division. And it'll take a lot of approvals to get rid of it. It's not easy to get rid of specifically cybersecurity because it has government approvals needed as well, I think, for selling. So then basically without Cylance, cyber is profitable. Almost really made it clear here in the conference that they will be selling Cylance. So confirmed it without saying, in my opinion. Talked about if they were to make Cylance grow, it would take more money, right? So more money and more time, and it doesn't make sense when other parts of BlackBerry is profitable. That's what he, like, not word for word what he said, but he said it doesn't make sense to put more money into it and take more time when other parts of BlackBerry is profitable. So it looks like it's more of the case that they will be selling Cylance, because if it doesn't make sense to him, in my opinion, I think it won't make sense to the other BlackBerry management team as well. So in terms of the other directors and all stuff, if Tim doesn't see that it makes sense to put more money into it plus more time, then I think the rest of BlackBerry thinks the same way. And then also the next key point, also it looks like they have more unreported cost cutting coming from Cylance side and will be told in the earnings in December. So if he stated that it takes more money and it will take more money to make it grow and more time to make it grow, but yet they're cutting costs from it too at the same time, then to me this just pretty much confirms Cylance is going to be sold. But the question is how soon. I personally don't think it'll be during Q4 or before Q4. I think it'll be after the fact, and I think it'll be sometime maybe next year. The reason why I'm stating sometime next year is this team does move pretty fast, at least it looks like to me. And if that's the case, then I think we could see sometime potentially next year being sold, right? So we'll see. But there is a pro and con to this too. The pro is you have influx of cash coming in, and then in the RBC conference, they were told that what is another avenue you could be using cash for, and it's a possibility, it's not guaranteed. That Tim stated actually was a possibility is we could do a share buyback, which is kind of a good sign. Even if they don't do it, the fact that they mentioned it is because it shows that there's actually a future for the company. Otherwise, why would you do share buyback, in my opinion, right? The con is, though, the negative side is, if I'm not mistaken, I believe they bought the company Cylance in 2019 for a little bit over $1 billion. I think it was 1.1 or something like that, maybe a little bit more. And now if they were to sell it, I might be wrong, but I don't think they'll get to that number. But again, I might be wrong. Originally, they bought Cylance for the intellectual property, like the AI portions of cybersecurity, and to integrate it to their other products. I wish they kind of focused on Cylance in the beginning of the get-go, because if you remember and followed Cylance as well, it was pretty much a give or take direct competitor with CrowdStrike, which has performed well in terms of their share price. And the CEOs were kind of like essentially competitively butting heads, and Cylance was ahead to a point, to like a certain degree. So to not necessarily have that portion grow out is unfortunate, but you can't really look in the past. You have to basically act with what you have right now. And again, it's not profitable, but the cybersecurity division would be profitable without Cylance. And so it's, at the end of the day, a better move. Just like Tim said, it doesn't make sense to dump more money into it and more time to make that side profitable. But again, unfortunately, like I stated, the market cap's at 1.52 billion, which was the share price closed at $2.57 US. And they bought Cylance for give or take a little bit over $1 billion, which is kind of disheartening to see that. But this is a new management team. They weren't necessarily in charge of what the directions would be during that time, right? Like they could have been obviously part of BlackBerry during that time, but just not necessarily in charge calling the shots. So, and then they used it for the intellectual property. But I'm going on a tangent there. Sorry about that. They also mentioned, by December they'll report the additional cost cutting, and that's coming from the Cylance side, which is quite important, at least if you're thinking about the Cylance being sold. Then the next points was for QNX. They mentioned the level of content again. And they mentioned this before, but I'm going to reiterate it right after this statement. So they said that they are not looking to be reliant on the volume of cars being sold, but more content expansion to bring in revenue. So more car volume sales does help, but looking to expand past that with more content. And then also into adjacent fields like medical. So essentially, like I've stated in the past, just arbitrary numbers. If they sold not they, but like automakers in general sold 200,000 vehicles last year, and then this year they sold about 100,000. Again, just arbitrary made up numbers. Then BlackBerry's revenue would actually decline this year with 100,000 vehicles if it's just like one-time sales, right? But if it's more content driven, like for example, the idea of BlackBerry Ivy, which hopefully comes to fruition fully at one point, is they could be using those 200,000 vehicles out on the road with this 100,000 vehicles this year, and yet you would hope more vehicle volume sales would increase, therefore revenue would increase regardless, but it wouldn't take a massive hit because it would be compounding with 200,000 last year, 100,000 this year, 300,000 total, and subscription base and royalties coming in for 300,000 vehicles for this year versus just 100,000 vehicles for this year in terms of reporting. So there's that. And if I remember correctly, the split in terms of the, the QNX, in like IoT division is about 80% in vehicles, 20% in terms of like medical and other fields in general. So they're looking to not break off from the automotive sector. They still want to be in the automotive sector predominantly, like the number one and all stuff. I believe QNX is number one anyway, but they want to expand other fields as well, not to be so reliant on the automakers. And then also mention about auto development is on the slow side, and that they try to do things in-house first. So they've mentioned in this past with the effects of BlackBerry Ivy in terms of what's the negative side is the automakers want to try to do the things themselves first, and if they can't do it, then they'll come to, like, for example, BlackBerry and all that stuff, right? But there was a key point right after that was stated. Automakers can't slow down on their development too much in terms of trying to stay competitive. So if they can't do it on their side fully and they try to slow down in general, they can't because the competition. So even if one automaker tries to slow down, they're going to fall behind quite a bit because the other automakers want to push the envelope at times. So basically, if the water rises, all boats rise kind of thing. So the same essence. And then personal opinion, this is a good point for BlackBerry Ivy. So that's just my personal opinion. Then they talked about design wins, life cycles, like they mentioned in the past. The downfall is they take some time to sign, but when they're signed, they're about 5-10 years contract, which is awesome in terms of revenue growth. And then the backlog is estimated around 850 million. So saying that the backlog is growing, it's growing healthy, right? I will say in terms of BlackBerry, they've mentioned 815 million or something before, but the 850 million that was mentioned was by TD, the spokesperson, right? I forgot his name, unfortunately. Sorry about that. Then Tim mentioned that they hired a new head of sales. I couldn't hear it clearly exactly, but I think it was for the QNX side, which is awesome. So hopefully we see more growth in general, and this head of sales does a really good job. Then he talked about reducing corporate costs as well. And that was basically it. I think it was a good talk. The only thing is, I will say a lot was on the repeat side, but it reaffirmed that the Cylance is basically, for the most part, looking to be sold, right? Could be a good and bad thing. In terms of the way what we look at face value right now, moving forward, I think it's a good thing. But the only downfall is, like I said, if you look at it, the whole bigger picture and in the past and all stuff, it's not good to look in the past. Basically, you have to move forward with what you have right now. That's the one negative. That's the only unfortunate part. But that's basically it. If you have any questions, ask them down below. I'll try to answer them as soon as possible. Thanks again for watching. Take care. God bless and peace.